Tensions remain high in Georgia amid severe political crisis. In a latest, Mikhail Kavelashvili was sworn in as president, but the outgoing president, Salome Zurabishvili, said she was leaving the residence, but Kavelashvili had no legitimacy as president. Now, to discuss more on this, I'm joined by foreign affairs expert, Dr. Swasti Rao. Ma'am, first of all, thank you so much for joining in on the broadcast. Major political crisis in Georgia, people out on streets, Kavelashvili sworn in as president. How do you analyze the current political situation in the country?
Well, very good evening to you, Siddharth. It's great to be here. And thank you for that question. I'm glad, you're discussing it, but because often Georgian geopolitics and what is happening in Caucasia is seldom not really seen and discussed in India.
True.
So first of all, congratulations for bringing that up, because it indeed is a political crisis.
Yeah.
So very quickly, if you remember why this drama has unfolded, I think the roots of this go back to a month ago almost, when the Prime Minister, okay, so just for the viewers, understanding, in Georgia, there are two key posts, the president and the prime minister, but the prime minister is the one who has all the executive power. And the prime minister's government, has basically, and that has been in power for many, many years in Georgia now. So what they have done is that, according to the people, they have gone back on their promise of joining the EU, because they formally joined the EU accession talks. They, as in Georgians, formally joined the EU accession in 2022 or 2023, I think in 2023. And what they have now done this year is that they've rolled back, that particular demand. And the people seem to be very angry with that, because the people say that this is happening because the Prime Minister's party is very close to Russia. In fact, the head of the Prime Minister's party is an oligarch with very deep ties with Russia. So that's what the people say. And that's also what the OSCE says, and the European Commission, etc. And what really started happening was that they started to, in fact, go against what the EU accession law requires, and started to insist on outlawing foreign influence and another law that started to discriminate against sexual minorities. And for making that EU accession, you have to literally also have these basic reforms, unless, you can't really join the EU. So cutting a long story short, what has happened is that the Prime Minister's party has rolled back on that plan. And of course, the people are very upset over it, because I think not many people know that in Georgia's modern constitution, joining the EU is actually laid down as a constitutional plan, So
it's in the constitution, right?
Correct. Yeah. So, joining the EU, or the aim, that particular aim, is pretty much anchored in Georgia's constitution. And if you look at whenever the pollings have happened about whether the Georgians should join the EU or not, it's more or less 80% plus minus people in Georgia have always backed EU membership. And just to clarify a little bit, all the support that you see in Georgia is for joining the EU, which is a geo-economic bloc. There is not so much drive in Georgia to join the NATO, because they obviously see what has been Ukraine's fate. So this is about joining the EU. And the protests ever since have all been because of this, that it's not just about the fact that they don't want to recognize the new Prime Minister and his party, but they are also very upset about how this accession plan has been rolled back. And now, I think few hours ago, the president has stepped down. The president belongs to the opposition party, and a new president has now come. He was a Manchester club footballer, Manchester United footballer. And yes, so the political unrest is just continuing, and I don't see that ebbing anyway soon, because I think some kind of a reconciliation needs to be brought out between the ruling party and the people.
Dr. Rao, like you were also mentioning, opposition is accusing ruling party of authoritarian, anti-Western and pro-Russian policies. Now, outgoing President Salome Zurabishvili says, she's leaving the residence, but Kavelashvili had no legitimacy as president. What does this indicate? Is anyone having an ultimate say here?
Now, very quickly, like I told you, that one needs to understand that president is not really that powerful a post in Georgia. It's basically the prime minister that is the head of the executive. So obviously one can understand, we here in India understand that well, because here it's the prime minister that really is the leader of the country, But as far as the legitimacy is concerned, I think the point that the outgoing president has made is that was the one that truly reflected people's view on the accession when it came to the EU, whereas the new the Manchester City footballer who's now become Georgia's new president, in fact the entire process, she is called out against the entire process. She says that there's this electoral college that has chosen this particular candidate, but then he is basically chosen because he's closer to the prime minister. So end of the day, this is a kind of a ploy by the prime minister to strengthen his grip over Georgian politics, because I mean you can very well understand that if the prime minister is from a different party which has majority, and if the opposition has a precedent, then practically you're talking about a deadlock kind of a situation in day-to-day politics. And I think this was coming. I mean, I'm not very surprised of this change. I think somewhere ever since the protests were gripping the city, the capital particularly, and especially since the way it was covered by all the Western media. Typically what happens in these post-Soviet societies is anytime there is a pro-Western narrative, it is always mired with a lot of the CIA hand and all of that.
True.
All the color revolutions. There's an old history of how the color revolutions have happened. Nearby Ukraine is a very good example of what happened in 2014 Maidan revolution. But what I'm trying to say is that I think the best way for the ruling party to strengthen their grip on the politics of the day is to make sure that the president is also somebody that has the same kind of an outlook. And I was honestly somewhere expecting that we would see a change in the president very soon, because this would have really locked Georgia in a kind of a political deadlock. So I don't really see that the deadlock is anywhere completely resolved. But for sure, the prime minister right now has strengthened his grip on the political narrative by getting a president that supports him. That's true. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that whatever the situation is in Georgia right now, it was pretty much on the cards?
Well, I mean, it is pretty much on the cards, because when you look at Kavelashvili, so he's just become the president, and it was not really an election because he was the only candidate in the ballot. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to tell you, that's one of the reasons why the outgoing president has said that this is a completely illegitimate kind of a government, because he doesn't really. Where is the election? I mean, he's nominated, and he's the only one to be nominated, and he's the only one to go and cast a ballot for. So this really does look like a very staged and a very managed kind of a political, development. And what I'm saying is that I think from the prime minister's perspective, it makes a lot of sense for him to have somebody who can join hands with him and somebody that locks horns with him.
Okay, Dr. Rao, very quickly, do you believe that the chaos that the country is witnessing is purely because of Georgian Dream's suspension of EU accession talks until 2028, which is abruptly halting a long-standing national goal of joining the bloc, or there could be other reasons as well? Very quickly.
Now, very quickly, if you ask me very quickly, yes, that is the only reason. That is the only dominant reason. This particular rollback has been happening ever since 2012, and small little changes have always caught everybody's attention. But this formal rollback is the real cause of the anger, and that is why I see that unless these differences are reconciled, I don't see the protest dying down anytime soon. That's true.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a wonderful analysis by you. Thank you so much for joining in on the broadcast once again.
My pleasure. Thank you.